The bulk of the action of Shark is set in an experimental psychiatric community in northwest London in 1970. And it's a community established along the lines of the anti-psychiatrist, the Scottish anti-psychiatrist R.D. Laing, who started the Philadelphia Association and believed that people who are mentally ill are in some ways just semantically misunderstood. They're kind of making, or they're responding to a kind of mad world. And the Philadelphia Association communities, most famous of them was Kingsley Hall. The idea was that mental health practitioners and their patients lived together without there being any of these kinds of divisions. So that's what this place is like. One of the inmates in it, however, is a man called Claude Evinrude. And we learn in the progress of the novel that he was on a ship called the USS Indianapolis when it was sunk in the Pacific on the 30th of July 1945. In fact, the last US naval vessel to be sunk during the Second World War, torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. And it's quite an unpleasant story. Torpedoed shortly before midnight. One of the torpedoes hit the magazine, and so the whole ship exploded. And about 1,000 men went into the water, and they weren't rescued for 3 days. They could have been rescued really quickly. I mean, there were ships within a few hours sailing time. There were planes within an hour. But due to what the American slang acronym of the period was a snafu, situation normal, all fucked up, they had not been entered on communications logs. So nobody, the ship was sailing from Guam to Leyte in the Philippines, so nobody knew that it hadn't arrived. And when they were eventually picked up after 3 days, there were only about 150 men left. So kind of following on from a lot of stuff Philip was saying this morning. Philip Hoare does whales, I do sharks. We can never be married or have children. It would be an unholy missenegation. So they were in the water for 3 days. When they were picked up, only 150 of them left. Some died of exposure, some died of injuries during the attack on the ship, but by far the majority died from shark attack. It was the biggest recorded shark attack in history. And Guignol doesn't get much grander than that. But I was interested when I learned about the Indianapolis on why they were there. And the reason why they were there was they'd in fact sailed from San Francisco only about 2 weeks before. And before they'd sailed from San Francisco, they'd taken delivery. This was a heavy cruiser with a crew of 1,000 men. And the cargo consisted just of a plywood box about 3 meters by 3 meters and a small steel canister about 2 feet wide. And they took delivery of this cargo and sailed straight across the Pacific. They actually clocked the fastest time to Hawaii they'd ever been. They sailed straight to a place called Tinian Island, which was the forward base of the 509th Composite Squadron under Colonel Paul Tibbets. Some of you will now realize what the cargo was. It was the bomb casing and the fissile material for Little Boy, the atom bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. In fact, the bomb was dropped on August the 4th or 6th, I can't quite remember, 6th, on August the 6th, 1945. The Indianapolis was sunk on the 30th of July. This is the way kind of novelists think about things, which is obviously not right. To me, I thought, well, maybe this was some kind of, preemptive collective punishment on the part of Mother Nature, who perhaps would object to the first release of this fissile material into her rivers and seas, and to the murder of, 250,000 people in a split second. So, this kind of savagery of nature and this kind of ghastly kind of moral equivalence or moral inequivalence is what runs behind the novel Shark. But Claude Evinrude, who is now a resident and flamboyantly mentally ill in 1970, was on the Indianapolis. And then not on it anymore. Shark. Claude unties the tapes of his life vest, and the kid, some poor stupid hick like all the rest, raises his arms automatically so they slide down and out of the armholes. You're welcome. And would sir like to try another sports coat? The hands are poised for a moment. Claude sees there's no skin or flesh on them at all, only cooked tendons stretched over white florets of knuckle bones. Then, it's the last roll of the dice, my friend, and they're gone. Already 10 feet down, sinking fast, the kid's long-sleeved denim shirt twirls about him. His bell-bottom dungarees whir, and his pillbox hat oscillates, a white dot hopping from word to word across the sea's screen. Talk about the moon, floating in the sky, looking at a lily on a lake. The kid is 20 feet down now, his arms up and circling, his feet down and revolving the other way. His hips swing as he hula-hulas into the deep that doesn't seem so very deep due to the amazing clarity of the water. Claude experiments, turning his whole head because his eye sockets are filled with gritty sand. He sees the sea turn from green to aquamarine to cobalt blue to silver blue to silvery to silver white, then vanish completely as I push my head up her skirt. Finest ear protectors a fellow can get, flesh-filled nylons fitted snug to the head and dried with talc. The kid's maybe 40 feet down now, yet his dancing, plummeting body can still be clearly seen. Happy talk, keep talking, happy talk. At Wright-Patterson Field, combat veterans had told Claude that when their parachutes collapsed, falling men spun, even as the ship they'd bailed out of flipped up on its wing and spun away from them, while the Kraut fighter that had scored the hit wheeled away too, so everywhere in the sky could be seen spinning things. Talk about the moon. Claude supposes if the sinking kid could only tip his head back, he'd see my face floating in the sky. But really, it's too late for that. The kid must be nearing full fathom friggin' 5, and the sun rays, which Claude sees flicker-fingering boots, tin cans, and other slowly descending debris, can no longer touch him. The kid has almost reached the Emerald City's limits. Claude wonders what sort of a how'd you do he'll get from the welcoming committee that circles him, their long grey bodies zigging, zagging, and circling evasively. What are their names? Ah, yes. Ivan Shark, Fury Shark, Admiral Himikito, that chink shitbird Fang, and the sinister Barracuda. There's obviously no possibility of Claude warning the kid, let alone saving him. But for his own satisfaction at least, he wishes he'd had the patience to decipher that day's codograph, a useless mishmash of letters and numerals. As he watches the first inquisitive shark nuzzle the kid's belly, only spools through his own soggy head. AM 85-9 R 45 HJ 88. At least, Claude thinks, I've taken my vitamins. And he feels for the morphine syrettes he liberated from the emergency packs in the rafts, lashed to the bulkhead by the radio room. Reassuringly, they're still in the button-down pocket of his shirt. But how long can it be before the seawater happy talks its way up the hypos and ruins all those healthy vitae minds? All mine, this food. Those other lunkheads, the green hands running around like they were after coups. and the sad sack sailors trying to corral all those farm boys, prairie boys, and banjo-picking freaks so as to herd them over the side. None of them had the smarts to pick up any supplies before they took the dive. Yes, Claude snickers to himself, they're lesser men. Men who didn't volunteer for the secret squadron, which is why they mostly flipped their wigs when the torpedoes hit. Those who didn't flipped them when they saw their shipmates flying towards them across the tilting deck. The fleshy streamers flayed from their arms and legs, flapping in the hot air, blasting from the burning fuel. Flipped them at the grotesque sight. The skin angels in flight. Behind them, flames flaring from the smokestack. Flipped them as the skin angels flocked to the fantail, where, too crazed by pain to recall the layout of their own ship, if they'd known it to begin with, they slithered about in its dying blood. Bilge water, piss and turds from the heads, melted ice cream and still fizzing soda from the dumb gedunk stand, before launching themselves, screaming, over the taffrail. Claude had seen them when he was on board, their fledgling wings spread in the hellish light. He'd seen still more of them once he was struggling in the water as the mass of the sinking ship dragged him back. Although shocked by his searing slide down the hull and the cold impact of the waves, Claude realized either his abandonment of the ship had taken a fraction of the time it seemed, or there must be a great host of the skin angels. For there they'd been, high above him, each one silhouetted against the low scudding clouds for a couple of seconds, then launching into the air, managing maybe 2 or 3 futile wing beats, before being swatted by the Indianapolis's slowly revolving screws. "Quick, Henry, the flit!" and crumpling among all the other black flies into the sticky pool of fuel oil that lay, molasses, on the heaving waves. Waves that now cradle Claude so tenderly. "Embrace me, you irreplaceable you," raising him up, then easing him gently down. Best not, Claude thinks, get too far down, 'cause then I'll find myself with "Royster doyster, little oyster, down in the slimy sea. You ain't so different, lying on your shell bed, to the likes of little old me, accepting that. Royster doyster, you're somewhat moister than I would like to." "What the fuck did you do that for?" The dumb Polak, whose name is Gorecki or something like that, pulls Claude's head from the water, tearing the sweetly salty sheets from his shell bed. Neptune's muffled subaquatic realm is conquered by this, the hurting disk of the noonday sun, the long hard swell of the open ocean, and on the slope of that swell, the disintegrating chain of men Claude is deprived of a link by untying the kid's life vest and letting him sink. Again, "What the fuck did you do that for?" Gorecki's 2-day stubble rasps against Claude's. His Chilly Williams life vest presses into Claude's burnt back. His paddling feet kick at Claude's calves, tearing the saturated skin. "I did that," Claude is thuck-thinked through cracked lips, "because he was dead." "He weren't dead!" Gripping Claude's scruff, Gorecki shakes out his own words. "I heard him talking when you was untying him." "Oh," Claude croaks. "Give us a fucking rest, will you, Gorecki? The kid was praying, saying his last prayers. He was a Catholic, same as you, and he thought I was the chaplain The chaplain been by a while back. The kid begun to give up, and the chaplain went way over there. The kid said he couldn't hold out, and he wanted to go out praying. What am I going to do, Gurecki? Refuse a man his dying with? It's the most Claude has said to Gurecki in the long hours they've been spooning. In your arms I find love so delectable, dear. I'm afraid it isn't quite respectable, dear. And he thinks it may be this talkativeness as much as his explanation that pacifies the Polack who lets go of his hair. Claude's gaze sweeps over the beaver heads of their companions as his hands smuggle the tapes of the kid's life vest behind his back, fumbling them into a knot that'll have to do for now. Whatever his other little foibles, Claude comprehends this crucial fact perfectly well. Survival is all about everything having to do for now. Survival is a jerry-rigged little raft of flotsam on the ocean wave, and if Gurecki had ridden him harder, Claude could have euchred him any number of other ways. He might have pulled rank, although he doubts this would have worked, given their current communistic situation, officers and enlisted men, swabs and Marines, all in it together, and me the only flyboy. Or Claude could have fanned out for Gurecki some of the choicer cards he'd picked up censoring the dumb Polack's mail. It had been a strange realization, this, that seeped into him during the darkest hours of their first night together, when in fear and trembling Gurecki spilt the beans on his activities as a coxsman back home in his Jerkwater, Pennsylvania steel town. Double and triple timings he felt the need to unburden himself of now, hoping, Claude presumed, that a buoyant conscience might help him stay afloat. Claude didn't let on he knew all about these peccadillos already. To say sins would be to dignify them, because he'd read Gurecki's letters to these broads, and purely for the hell of it, he'd blanked out all the ham-fisted endearments, while scrawling on the one destined for Mrs. Gurecki, "You're not the only one, you know," before sealing and stamping it. Ker-chunk, you asshole lunk, passed by naval censor. Claude knew that for many another man, in particular a mackerel snapper such as Gurecki, this crazy coincidence would be further confirmation of God's existence, the self-same God who'd perpetrated this almighty fuck-up on them all. Not Claude, not me. To Claude, Gurecki's secrets were only more of the flotsam folks left lying around for anybody to make use of who was good with his hands. Flotsam, such as the very pistol tucked in Claude's belt, the malted milk tablets and the morphine syringes in his shirt pockets, and the drowned kid's life vest he keeps stuck between his thighs, waiting for when Gurecki isn't looking to make the swap. What Claude can do is sneak out the fourth of the syringe, nip off the cap with his teeth, and stab it into his thigh through his pants leg. Not because he's in pain, how could he be when he'd only had the third an hour or so ago, but because I can, and because he can lie painlessly back on Gurecki's bazoom while pain is all around. A superfluity of pain, seared in the skin, burnt in the flesh, and charred in the bones of these sailor boys. Pain is in the salt water eating into these wounds, and the sun hammering down on them. Most of all, pain is in the vitals of those boys foolish enough to slake their terrible thirst with seawater, who soon enough begin crazily ranting, then puke their guts out, some so violently they turn full somersaults. Pain is in the fists that fly when one of the boys dies, and 10 others gather round to fight over who should get his life vest. Not that these crummy pieces of shit are worth having once the penetrating seawater has been sopped up by their kapok stuffing. You might as well tie a goddamn sponge on. Gorecki's arms tighten round his chest and the Polak grunts, "What's that?" And it's only then that Claude realizes he's croaked aloud, because pain is in those arms around his chest as well. Pain is in the legs that grip his hips too. Pain, Claude concludes, is in all human touch, no matter how gently murmurous. Thank you.